How have you traumatized your parents? So when I was 16 I found out that who I thought was my dad was actually just my stepdad and not my real dad. Well, a sister I never knew about contacted me and it turns out my real dad lived in a small town just 8 miles away from mine. Well, I met my sister and had her come over one day while my mom was at work. My mom came home early and when I introduced my sister, I introduced her as my girlfriend. The look on my mom's face was priceless. That is beautifully evil. I was around 14 and was pretty depressed, so my parents were on guard. One day, I woke up early with a runny nose, but being tired I just went back to sleep. A few hours later, my mom is panicking as she wakes me up. My face was covered in blood due to a bloody nose and I looked like a corpse. I sneezed when I had a bloody nose once during the night, so there was blood splattered on my wall and pillow with blood all over at noon while I was still sleeping pretty heavily when my mom came to wake me up. I woke up because of the loud screaming going on in my room and scared the entire family by accident. When we were about 5 or 7 years old, me and my brother discovered the similarities between ketchup and blood. Mom wasn't home yet, so we got some knives from the kitchen, all the ketchup we could find, cut some holes in our shirts for the knives and staged a huge crime scene in the living room. We loved secretly watching the thrillers our parents used to see in the evenings from the living room door when we were believed to be in our beds, so we had some experience with a plausible scenario and put a lot of thought into it, creating a huge battle scene with blood on the walls, the couches and of course lots of ketchup on our emotionless bodies in the center of the room. Mom had kind of a breakdown. You were a fricked up child. When I was in 8th grade I was staying the night at my friend's house, and it so happened that one of my favorite movies, A Christmas Story, was going to be playing on TBS. My family didn't have cable and I knew everyone would enjoy watching it on Christmas at my house, so I asked my buddy if we could record it onto VHS so I could take it home. He grabbed a blank tape from his dad's office, popped it in the VCR, and we recorded Ralphie and his Christmas shenanigans. The following day I went home and told my parents and siblings that I had a copy of the movie. They were ecstatic and we all agreed to watch it the following week on Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve rolls around, and my parents, brothers, about 5 and 8 years old, sister, 7 years old, and myself gather around the TV to watch the movie. I rewind the tape to beginning and press play. For the next 3 seconds, although it felt like an hour, my entire family and I watched a woman sucking a large dong before it quickly cut to A Christmas Story. We had obviously taped over one of my friend's dad's PO tapes. Nobody flinched. I looked at my parents, who had these bizarre frozen smiles as if nothing had happened and everything was right with the world. My brothers and sister continued watching the TV but had looks of bewilderment on their faces as they tried to process what they had just seen while simultaneously trying to enjoy the beginning of A Christmas Story. Nobody in my family has ever mentioned this event since. I'm 30 years old now, and A Christmas Story is no longer a part of our family Christmas tradition. You'll shoot your eye out, may have different interpretations in that part of A Christmas Story. I fell out of a moving car when I was 6. Luckily I was in a car seat and I landed in grass. How does this happen? I was young enough that I took supervised baths. My mom stepped out of the bathroom for just a few seconds and I thought it would be super funny to sink to the bottom and lie motionless. Mom didn't think it was nearly as funny when she came back in. Similarly, I was young enough to take supervised baths and was exhausted at the time. My mom stepped out and I instantly fell asleep, with my face in the water. I was dreaming and I knew it was hard to breathe. My mom came in screaming my name and my head shot up, slamming into the faucet. I was fine, but she put me to bed instantly. When I was about 8 years old, I was going through our medicine cabinet, like the little rascal I was, and found one of my brother's old EpiPens, the epinephrine injector fused during a severe allergic reaction. I was curious about how it worked, and figured it was like any other pen in that you clicked the top with your thumb and the needle came out the other end. Turns out the needle comes out of the end that you click, and it ended up going right into my thumb. When my parents came upon me screaming my lungs out in the bathroom, the walls were painted with blood that I'd sprayed around getting the pen out of my thumb. Apparently it was pretty grisly. LOL. My brother did literally the exact same thing with my EpiPen when he was like 11ish, in the middle of a church service. To this day we don't know why, but toddler me decided one night to get out of bed, grab my toy hammer, walk to my parents' room, round the bed, and smack my sleeping dad in the face before dropping the hammer and returning to bed. He's still jumpy in his sleep. Thanks for the laugh. For some context, when I was about 7, I lost my cat. He just disappeared one day, probably coyotes, but his favorite thing to do was to sleep in my mom's bathroom sink. Also, my neighborhood is infested with cats because someone down the street never got hers fixed. So, now for the real story. I was swinging on my porch swing, looked over into the bushes, and saw a cat. It was laying down, eyes closed, mouth open, no wounds as far as I could see. It looked asleep, but it looked sick too. So to make it feel better, I picked the dead cat up, took it inside, and placed it in the bathroom sink. Plus, I was feeling really lonely after my first cat disappeared. I thought my mom would let me keep this one. I find this morbidly adorable. A child with little understanding of the concept of death attempting to tend to an animal's corpse. I think that definitely would have left a mark on me as a parent, though I think I'd be more moved than traumatized. My mom got my sister and I our first set of makeup when we were 11 and 15. We ran to the bathroom to try it out and immediately decided that the best course of action was to paint bruises and wounds all over our faces, fake fight sounds and screaming, then run to our mother's office area appearing like we needed to go to the hospital. It worked. She turned about as white as a sheet and screamed before we collapsed into laughter. We weren't allowed to have makeup again until we were adults and bought it for ourselves. I haven't, but my little sister used to hold her breath when she threw a fit. Used to scare my mom to death. My dad said she'll start breathing when she passes out. My daughter threatened me with this. I looked at her with a bored look until she went down. I didn't catch her or anything. She came to and realized daddy wasn't being bullied. When I was about 9 years old, we lived in a crappy high-rise apartment building. I opened the window of my bedroom, removed the screen, stuck my head out the window and screamed as loud as I could like I was falling. I then quickly proceeded to hide under my bed as my parents frantically came running into my room with me nowhere to be seen and thought I fell out the window. Eventually I started giggling and was busted. They were not impressed, to say the least. The first movie I saw with my ex-wife was Knocked Up. At the time there was awkwardness because we'd accidentally had unprotected sex the week before. It turned into a big joke between us, and I bought the movie for her for Christmas. Mom asked me, "What did you get Jen for Christmas?" and without hesitating or thinking, I said, "Knocked Up." She was driving and almost wrecked the car. This happened the summer after my senior year of high school. After a long night of drinking, I came home and apparently felt the desire to puke. My parents live on the 3rd floor. I live on the 2nd and have a bathroom on my floor. For some reason I turned the fan on when I went into the bathroom, which is kinda loud, and my parents' room is pretty much right above the bathroom. So I puked hard, mostly in the toilet at first. I get hot and really sweaty when I'm puking, so naturally I stripped down to my boxers. I then somehow managed to puke all over myself. Well, that's unacceptable to drunk me, so I guess I decided to take a shower to clean up. Never managed to turn the water on. Next thing I know, I'm getting woken up by my mother screaming bloody murder, crying profusely. Apparently I passed out in the tub. The fan woke my mom up in the middle of the night, so she came to investigate and found me nearly naked, covered in my own puke, passed out in the bathtub with, she says, my eyes rolling into the back of my head. She thought I was dead. I would say that was a bit traumatizing for her. I think being covered in puke should be unacceptable to normal you. I was 3 or 4 and wrecked my tricycle and hit my head on my sister's bike pedal, who was riding right beside me. I hit an artery and my white shirt turned red before I got back inside to show her. She still freaks out thinking about it. You actually got really lucky. If you did indeed hit an artery, as an adult you probably would have died if you didn't have someone there who knew how to deal with the situation. Tourniquet and 911, etc. But as a child, your arteries will actually clot and the bleeding will typically stop itself before you die or even pass out. When my sister was about 2, she climbed up on the bathroom counter, grabbed my father's razor, and proceeded to brush her teeth with it. Luckily all she did was nick her tongue with it, but the amount of blood was awful. The thought of this made me hyperventilate. When I was younger, my parents took one of my toys away from me, a brand new motherfricking Hulk toy. This made toddler me angry, so I did the only logical thing to do. I crap in their room. I crap all over their bed and floor. When I was young, maybe around 5 or 6, I was trying to find Christmas presents in closets or under beds, but instead I found a crap load of condoms and adult toys. At the time I didn't know what they were, so I opened up the box of condoms. Thinking it was a balloon, I started to run downstairs with what I thought was a sword, vibrator, and trying to blow up the condoms. I then ran into the room where my parents were and started telling them how I finally found my Christmas presents. My parents still talk about that today. XX Christmas came early that year. After my first BJs, I rushed home to tell my best friend in the world at the time. I got on Facebook chat and told him every dirty detail. I then left my Facebook open when I went to shower. My mom, after arriving home, went to check her email and learned about my new sexual adventures. When I was 7 or 8, I did a science project on the antibacterial efficacy of various soaps. It basically involved keeping hands dirty for a day, pressing grubby thumbs into petri dishes full of agar, then washing and doing the same again. I'd take tracings of the cultures. Bigger colonies were bad, smaller ones good. This ended up winning the county science fair for my grade in a large metropolitan area, so that was nice. But before that, after I'd finished the experiments but before I'd discarded the dishes, I got into a dispute with my parents. Don't remember what about. I thought, I'll show them. So I took the nastiest culture and swabbed it onto their bedroom doorknob. They both got sick as dogs and I had to take care of them for a couple of days. Served me right. My dad was fixing this big ass closet one day. The closet was very old and had an extremely heavy door. The problem with that closet was that the door hinges was loose. At that time I was about 8-9 years old, and my little sister was fooling around inside the closet while my dad was trying to tighten the hinges. He told me to get her out of there, since she was just bothering him, and as I lifted her up, the goddamn closet door fell down on my pinky toe. It's all a blur, but I clearly remember me running down the hallway screaming my heart out while my sock got pumped with blood. After that I passed out, waking up a while later in the backseat of my father's car, with a ton of toilet paper around my foot. My dad didn't say a word. When I arrived at the hospital I got drugged down and operated. Fortunately, they managed to put my pinky toe back where it belonged. I'm guessing my dad felt very shameful after the incident. However, my mom told me a couple of years ago that after I lost my toe, he immediately put it inside his mouth. Because he had read that was the only way to save the toe from dying or something like that, and drove to the hospital with the toe in his mouth. I don't think he'll forget that. One time during my sophomore year in college, I had been feeling guilty for not seeing my family very often, even though they lived 20 minutes away, so I decided to take them out to dinner. Since I had some extra cash, I thought I would take them out somewhere nice, so we all went to Black Angus. I thought it would be cool to bring my boyfriend that I had been dating seriously for 6 months. No one in my family normally does this. I find out later that my dad was scared shitless that I was either going to tell the family I was either pregnant or getting married at that dinner. When I was a toddler I drank water remover. I smarts. I call it stunt baby. My 4-month-old standing on my hand as I balance him and let people take pictures. You have been visited by the hedgehog of happiness. If you want some of his joy, comment I love you happy hedgehog. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.